Imagine a single wild plant with more protein per gram than steak, more absorbable iron than spinach, and more calcium than milk. Yet we spend billions on pills while poisoning it in our own yards. Stinging nettle fights for survival with a defense scientists call the most advanced in the plant world. But why is the ultimate superfood hated, feared, and forgotten by those who need it most? The answer is not what you've been told. Getting past its sting could break you free from the system. Start with the numbers. Stinging nettle is not just another weed. By dry weight, its leaves pack 25% to 30% protein, matching lentils and even steak, and far outpacing spinach or kale. In a world chasing plant protein powders and expensive supplements, this wild green delivers a complete amino acid profile for free from the cracks in the pavement. This is green meat, iron. Nettle does not just compete, it dominates. Fresh nettle contains up to 6 milligrams of iron per 100 grams, and crucially, it carries its own vitamin C. That means the iron is actually absorbed, unlike spinach, where oxalates trap most of the mineral and send it straight through the body. The old Popeye myth falls apart under a microscope. Nettle is the real blood builder. Calcium is where the surprise gets bigger. A single cooked cup of nettle can provide roughly a quarter of your daily calcium needs. It is on par with a glass of milk, but without the lactose, the fat, or the industrial feedlot. While supermarket spinach looks strong on paper, its oxalates block absorption. Nettle's calcium is wild, bioavailable, and mineral-rich, drawn up from deep soil by roots that reach where farmed crops cannot. This is serious calcium. Magnesium, potassium, and fiber round out the package. This is a plant that covers nearly every base. Protein for muscle, iron for blood, calcium for bones, and a spectrum of micronutrients that modern diets often miss. Yet every year, billions are spent on protein shakes, iron pills, and calcium tablets, while nettle is sprayed, burned, and uprooted from backyards and farms. Nutrition scientists call it the perfect wild food, but the world calls it a weed. The numbers do not lie. The paradox is real. If nutrition were the only judge, nettle would be on every plate. So why do we hate it? The answer is not in the numbers, it is in the sting. A single brush against a nettle's leaf can feel like a punishment. Under a microscope, the reason is clear. Every leaf and stem is armed with thousands of glassy needles, each only 30 to 100 microns long. These are trichomes, hollow brittle tubes made of silica, sharper than a hypodermic needle. When skin glances across the plant, the fragile tip snaps off, and the remaining shaft plunges into the skin. In that instant, a chemical cocktail is injected. Formic acid, the same irritant in ant bites, is joined by histamine, acetylcholine, and serotonin. The result is burning, itching, swelling. The pain is not an accident of nature. It is a defense forged by evolution. Nettle is so rich in nutrients, protein, minerals, and vitamins that it would be stripped bare by any grazing animal if it did not fight back. The sting is proof of value, not malice. Plant physiologists have mapped this defense in detail. Trichomes work like tiny syringes, delivering their payload directly into the bloodstream. The histamine amplifies the reaction, while acetylcholine signals pain to the nerves. Serotonin adds to the inflammation, making sure the lesson is not forgotten. This is why the plant is classified as a noxious weed in so many states. Not because it is toxic, but because it is inconvenient. The sting is a barrier, but it is also a test. The barrier, though, is easily disarmed, a simple blanch in boiling water. Just 60 seconds is all it takes to collapse the silica needles and denature the irritants. The transformation is instant. The same leaves that could raise welts on bare skin become as harmless as spinach. On camera, a gloved hand drops fresh nettle tops into a pot. A minute later, they are lifted out, limp and safe to touch. The physiologist takes a bite. No gloves, no pain. The monster is gone. What remains is a wild vegetable, savory and mineral-rich, ready for the plate. The sting is not a curse. It is a key, and now the door is open. In the shadow of the Roman Empire, nettle was more than a plant. It was a tool for survival. Roman writers like Pliny the Elder cataloged its uses, describing how nettles were beaten against aching limbs to drive out cold and pain. The practice, called urtication, relied on the plant's sting to spark blood flow and warmth in the skin. While folklore credits legionaries on the cold frontiers with this ritual, the ancient texts dwell on nettle's power as medicine, not as a soldier's hack. What is certain is that the sting was harnessed, not feared. In the hands of healers, nettle became a living remedy for stiff joints and numb extremities, a practice that would echo through centuries. By the Middle Ages, the relationship with nettle deepened. After the long, hungry months of winter, when larders emptied and scurvy crept in, the first green shoots to break through the frost were often nettles. In monasteries and peasant cottages, the arrival of these shoots was a turning point. Recipes for nettle soup fill the pages of medieval herbals and household manuscripts. The Anglo-Saxon 9 herbs charm, written 1,000 years ago, invokes stithe nettle among the essential plants for healing and strength. Hildegard of Bingen, the 12th century abbess and herbalist, praised nettle for its purifying qualities. For families on the edge of famine, a bowl of nettle soup meant iron, vitamin C, and enough protein to bridge the gap until the next harvest. The sting, once neutralized by boiling, transformed the plant from a hazard into the first food of spring. In these eras, nettle was not a weed to be uprooted, but a lifeline. It soothed pain, staved off hunger, and carried generations through the hardest months. The evidence lies in the recipes, the charms, and the quiet reverence of those who wrote them down. Nettle's sting was the price of entry. Its nourishment, the reward. In the final years of World War I, German factories ran short of cotton. The British blockade had choked off supplies, and the textile mills that once turned out uniforms for millions of soldiers faced a crisis. The answer came from the wild edges of fields and roadsides. Stinging nettle, Urtica dioica, pressed into service on an industrial scale. Directives from Berlin mobilized farmers, schoolchildren, and even prisoners to collect nettle stalks by the ton. In 1917 and 1918 alone, over 2,500 metric tons of nettle fiber were harvested and processed, a figure pulled from Imperial War Museum records and German government reports of the time. Dr. Beverly Lemire, a textile historian, describes the process as both desperate and ingenious. Nettle fiber, unlike cotton, comes from the plant's stem, not its seed. After harvesting, the stalks were retted, soaked, and left to rot slightly, then broken, combed, and spun into a bast fiber as strong as flax, and when properly processed, finer than most linen. German textile engineers blended nettle with whatever cotton or flax could be found, weaving fabric that was tough, breathable, and surprisingly durable under battlefield conditions. Surviving samples in museum archives show that nettle cloth resisted wear better than many cotton blends of the era. Allied intelligence reports analyzing captured uniforms confirmed that finding. The mobilization was not just a footnote. It was a national effort with posters urging citizens to gather nettles for the war effort. Regional newspapers from Saxony and Bavaria ran collection tallies. Technical bulletins circulated instructions for maximizing fiber yield. In some towns, the nettle harvest rivaled that of flax or hemp. German soldiers marched and fought in uniforms made at least in part from a plant most associated with the sting of childhood summers. No patent, no foreign dependency, just a wild resource gathered and transformed by necessity. The lesson was clear. When the system broke down, the weed became a strategic asset. That industrial memory, too, would soon be erased. Walk through any modern supermarket, and you will find entire aisles dedicated to convenience. Pre-washed spinach, bagged kale, protein powders, calcium chews, iron supplements, all engineered, packaged, and branded for easy living. The wild plants that fueled survival for centuries now get no shelf space. Stinging nettle, once a lifeline, is now a target for herbicides and city fines. Its only crime is refusing to fit the mold of a marketable crop. The shift began quietly as industrial agriculture rewired how food was grown and sold. Crops that needed no gloves, no special handling, and no explanation were favored. Spinach and lettuce could be picked barehanded, tossed in a bag, and sold by the ton. Nettle, with its sting and its wild unpredictability, did not stand a chance in this new economy. There is no patent for wild nettle. No company can own the genetics, no seed monopoly. It grows freely wherever soil is left unpoisoned. In a system built on profit, that is a threat. Regulations followed the money. In many towns and housing developments, local codes now classify nettle as a noxious weed. Homeowners associations send warnings and city councils approve chemical sprays. The logic is circular. If it is not sold in stores, it must be a nuisance. The result is erasure. A plant that can outcompete spinach for nutrition and outlast droughts is systematically removed from lawns, parks, and even the wild edges of farmland, all in the name of tidiness and uniformity. Market incentives drive the erasure deeper. Industrial crops are bred for uniformity, transport, and shelf life. Nettle remains stubbornly wild. Its refusal to be tamed means it resists that system. It does not play by the rules of monoculture. It does not need irrigation, fertilizer, or pesticides. It just grows year after year wherever it is allowed. That independence makes it invisible to the food industry and actively hostile to the chemical companies who profit from its destruction. The knowledge required to use nettle, how to harvest with gloves, how to blanch away the sting, has faded from collective memory. Generations raised on packaged greens and sanitized produce aisles have lost the simple skills that once made nettle a staple. The forager's hands, the herbalist's kettle, the peasant's spring soup pot have been replaced by plastic clamshells and QR codes. Convenience has a cost, and it is paid in forgotten wisdom. A regulation expert explains that wild plants that cannot be patented or controlled are a problem for the market, not the consumer. If a weed can feed you for free, it competes with every product on the shelf. The system's logic is airtight. If it cannot be monetized, it must be marginalized. The gloves, the blanching, the harvesting, these are not obstacles to survival. They are barriers to profit. The story of nettle's erasure is not about nutrition or safety. It is about who gets to decide what counts as food and who benefits when a wild superfood is rebranded as a pest. In the end, convenience culture and market incentives have done what no famine or war could. They made us forget the wild. The knowledge is still there, dormant, waiting to be reclaimed. But first, the system must be questioned. The erasure of nettle is not an accident. It is a consequence of a world that values comfort over sovereignty, profit over independence, and forgets that the best food is often the one that grows for free. Soil scientist Dr. Ratan Lal stands in a field where the spinach looks tired, yellow at the edges. He digs down and holds up a clump of nettle. The roots stretch deep, 1 meter or more, tapping minerals untouched by shallow crops. Over the last 70 years, USDA surveys show iron in commercial spinach has dropped by as much as half. Modern fields, fertilized and tilled, cannot keep up with what has been stripped away. Nettle ignores the rules. It mines iron, calcium, and magnesium from the subsoil and delivers them to its leaves without permission or payment. This is why wild nettle still tests at 2 to 6 milligrams of iron per 100 gram, while its farmed rivals fade. A clinical researcher in Berlin flips through the latest Commission E monograph. In Germany, nettle is not just folk medicine. It is prescribed by doctors for benign prostatic hyperplasia, a condition that troubles millions of older men. Randomized trials show that a daily dose of nettle root extract, 360 to 600 milligrams, can drop symptom scores by 4 to 6 points on the IPSS scale. That is a shift men can feel. Fewer trips to the bathroom, better flow, less discomfort. The effect is on par with common pharmaceuticals, but with fewer side effects. Across Europe, pharmacies fill thousands of nettle root prescriptions every month. The science is published, the results are measured, and the plant's clinical effect is clear. In a small kitchen, a forager and chef lays out the steps. The leaves are easy to recognize. Opposite, serrated, with a square stem and a prickle you will never mistake twice. Gloves are non-negotiable. Harvest only the top 4 to 6 leaves from young plants before the flowers appear in late spring. These are the most tender, the richest in nutrients. Drop them into boiling water for 60 seconds. The sting is gone. The leaves wilt, turning a deep wild green. From here, the options are endless. Sauté with garlic, blend into soup, or dry for tea. Every step is a reclaiming of knowledge lost to convenience. Even the leftovers have value. Fermenting nettle leaves in water for a few weeks yields a fertilizer that is 2% to 5% nitrogen, enough to rival synthetic products. Gardeners call it plant rocket fuel. Pour it around tomatoes, beans, or fruit trees and watch the growth surge. This is a closed loop. Food, medicine, and fertilizer from a single plant, all for the price of a few scratches. The invitation is simple. Find a patch, learn the shape of the leaves, the feel of the stem, put on gloves, harvest the tops, boil, blanch, or dry. Taste what wild nutrition means. The sting is a rite of passage, not a warning. Every bowl of nettle soup, every cup of tea, every garden fed with nettle fertilizer is a small act of sovereignty. A step outside the system and back toward the skills our ancestors never forgot. Today, stinging nettle is still classified as a noxious weed. Yet, European clinics prescribe it while our supermarkets ignore it. As food insecurity and soil depletion accelerate, the question is not whether nettle is too wild for modern tastes. It is whether we are too domesticated to reclaim what is freely ours. Nature's most nutrient-dense plant grows at our feet. The only barrier left is the courage to reach for it.